Hello and welcome to Founded, a Pleasant Phantom production. I'm Tori Phantom, and together we're going to find and explore the stories you missed in history class. And joining me on this journey through American history is TikTok sensation, Gwen Lathland.
Hi, don't call me that.
I'm going to continue calling you that. Now, Gwen studied history in college, but not early American history. So she's bringing that public education history class level of knowledge to the table, and I'm going to fill in the gaps.
So, Founded is focused specifically on the founding of the United States?
Yeah, for now, at least, from the Revolution through the last revolutionary president to be elected, James Monroe.
Andrew Jackson would be...
No, James Monroe was.
You gonna explain that?
Eventually. I can't do it all in the intro, Gwenna.
And when we run out of American Revolution to talk about...
We're not gonna run out of American Revolution to talk about, not anytime soon, because the whole thing, war and revolution together, was well over 10 years, depending on who you ask, even longer. And there are countless personal stories, which are my favorite part of all of this.
Okay, so after we talk about all 10-ish years and your favorite personal stories, what happens?
We have plenty of things that got founded after that. Many foundings. We might even get to the French Revolution, because their revolution and our revolution tied together in way more ways than you'd think. Like, Marie Antoinette is a figure that we'll talk about for the American Revolution.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right. Okay, so then before we get to however Marie Antoinette ends up in the American Revolution, we start at the beginning, right? Of the American one?
Mm-hmm.
So I know that the Revolutionary War started with the shot heard round the world in 1775. So we start in 1775, battles of Lexington and Concord.
No. That's not where we're going to begin. You are right about when the shot heard round the world happened.
It did happen in 1775.
Yes. But that's not when the revolution started. So we got to go way before then. We're going to the 7 Years' War that really went on for 9 years and began in 1754 as the French and Indian War. And that name also makes no sense. And it was low-key George Washington's fault. So
your American Revolutionary War podcast is starting with an entirely different war.
Yep. Today, we're diving into George Washington's story before he became Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, the first president of the United States, and the father of our country. So we can't actually talk about the 7 Years' War / French and Indian War, the misnamed wars.
Yeah.
We can't talk about how that was George Washington's fault without talking about Robert Dinwiddie, who you've surely heard of.
We are going to get around to how the French and Indian War and the 7 Years' War managed to neither be named correctly, like even a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we could get to that if you want. Like,
listen, my lexophile butt will always be like, no, let's discuss how we named stuff poorly.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll just give you a quick rundown on that one, okay? So the 7 Years' War is when it became a world war. So that was kind of the first global conflict involving
multiple
America.
Nations. Yeah.
And so basically that's what it's considered to start. But the 7 Years' War really started with where we're starting, which is when the French and Indian War started, which was with George Washington. And that one is called the French and Indian War. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't make sense because Native Americans fought for both sides. It's just both chose to side with the French when they had to choose sides, and we'll get to that part.
So it wasn't the French and the natives fighting each other. It
No.
was the French just being French.
It was the British and the French fighting each other and then kind of forcing Native Americans to choose sides.
Oh, okay. So we've continued this pattern. Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Robert Dinwiddie. Tell me about Robert Dinwiddie.
Robert Dinwiddie was born to a rich Scottish family in 1692. However, his family's fortunes had declined by the time he graduated college, and Dinwiddie didn't like that because rich people like being rich.
Yeah.
So he dedicated himself.
Also, that has not changed over the course of history. Okay.
Exactly. So he dedicated himself to merchant trading and became the richest dude in Bermuda by the time he was 30. And you're not going to believe this. Are you ready?
I'm sure I will.
He used his wealth and success to gain power in government.
Oh, what? Did not see that coming. Whoa.
I know. And so he became a customs official first, and eventually that led him to Virginia, where he eventually became the royal governor. There is a difference between a royal governor and an elected governor. So royal governors were appointed by the crown to represent the royal interests, and they were the dominant political figures in the American colonies.
Okay.
Elected governors came later because we, the people, wanted a voice in government.
I was going to say, we didn't have elected governors when the colonies were the colonies. Before everything went down, when we say governor, we always meant old white dude picked other old white dude to be in charge, not the people decided who should lead them.
Now, there were in the colonies, they did have elected committees. They did have voices in colonial government, which is part of why there was this tension that happened.
Right.
But when we're talking about governors, they were appointed by the crown.
Okay.
So that's
old white dudes picked by old white dudes.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So while in Virginia, Robert Dinwiddie makes friends with other rich and powerful people.
This is also shocking. Go on.
I know. And this helped him to become a partner in the Ohio Company, where George Washington's older brother served on the board.
Okay.
Do you know what the Ohio Company is?
No.
So the Ohio Company was a land speculation organization of Englishmen and Virginians that was started in 1748 with the goal of obtaining unsettled land in the West to make money. That's just how I view what they were doing. There's like a better definition that doesn't make it seem like that's what they were about, but they just wanted to colonize.
They wanted to colonize.
Yes.
So, Ohio.
Yes. And so this was going to turn into a war no matter what, because at the time, the Ohio country, that was native land, right?
I mean, all of it was native land.
Yes,
we'd already shoved them off multiple places.
So, but there were like 6 different treaties that kept being signed. And so the Haudenosaunee, which we've talked about, they were referred to, the Haudenosaunee peoples were referred to
We've talked about the Haudenosaunee people on our other podcast.
On our other podcast, on Childproof. Yes. So the Haudenosaunee were referred to as Iroquois by the French and the League of Five Nations by the English. So they believed that they had transferred the lands between Blue Ridge.
Are so bad at naming things. They're terrible.
Truly.
At naming things.
Truly. But
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So the Haudenosaunee believed that they had transferred the lands between Blue Ridge and Ohio to the Virginians, and that the treaty pushed the boundary of the accepted colonial settlement.
So wait, at this point, where are we speaking as far as, like, what does the map kind of look like now? Because I know where Ohio is now on our current map. Are we talking about that exact same region, or are we still talking
beyond
about
that too? So like the Ohio that you know now is part of it, but you have to think.
But also Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, that sort of area.
Yeah, not that far north. That was kind of a different region.
Okay.
So kind of this big region that was considered the frontier.
So sort of the chunk we had to acquire before we got to Jefferson's.
Yes. And that's what I think a lot of folks might be unaware of, is that when you think of the 13 colonies as the states they are now, they were totally different boundaries.
Yeah, they also had super long boundaries. Like they went out for quite a while.
Yes,
to be
and they were also kind of limited by like the Appalachian Mountains. They weren't allowed to go past there. There was a treaty signed by the crown that forbade colonists from settling beyond the mountains, and the colonists didn't like that because they were colonists. They wanted to colonize. Right. So that also added to tensions. So the Haudenosaunee, they thought that there was this one chunk of land that they allowed the Virginians to have. The Virginians believed that they had acquired all rights to all Haudenosaunee land.
That's the audacity.
The
Haudenosaunee are like, you can have this rock. The white people are like, thanks, we'll take everything you own. No.
Yeah.
No.
So at this point, we have, in the Ohio country, we have the Haudenosaunee and other tribes, right? But the main leaders in this area were the Haudenosaunee. Okay. And then we have the French who want the land, and we have the British. So we're kind of all of these three different peoples are converging. Well, there's two different peoples converging on someone else's land.
So on primarily the Haudenosaunee, but other tribes as well.
Yes. And so it is important to note that the French didn't want to control the Ohio country as much as they wanted to be able to freely move through it so they could connect their Canadian settlements with the Mississippi settlements in the Illinois country.
Okay.
So they wanted the Ohio country to remain under neutral shared control with the Native Americans and to keep the British from colonizing.
So high key, the French deal was better than the British deal for the Haudenosaunee.
Yes, which is why when war broke out, many Native tribes sided with the French. But at the same time, during this time, most Native American tribes and peoples, they wanted to remain neutral, and they would use that neutrality to try to keep some of their power, because if they are neutral, then no one wants to push them to one side or the other.
Right. No one's trying to fight them.
Right. Exactly. So eventually they were pushed to have to choose sides. And for a lot of reasons, many chose to side with the French. Right. And that was for their own interest to keep their land.
It was the least colonial-ish.
Yes. And it gave them the best prospects of maintaining their land, their spaces,
their land, their power,
their
cultures.
Way of life. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So now that we have a little context here, back to Dinwiddie. Who was the most loyal of loyalists. He loved Britain and imperialism. And
as a reminder, we're back in 1754, so we are not in any way, shape, or form talking about what we call America. We are still very happily colonies of Great Britain.
Yes, exactly.
Kind of happily. Mostly happily colonies of Great Britain.
And eventually we'll get to, at the beginning of the Revolution, most colonists still wanted to make amends. So we'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Right now.
So Dinwiddie is a loyalist and everybody's British.
Yes. And he had sent a whole bunch of letters to the crown warning them that the French were moving into the Ohio territory. And these were like, we're under a big threat, right? But it's because of his ulterior motives with the Ohio Company. And so he gets a letter back with orders to protect His Majesty's possessions in North America. And this is where Washington enters the picture. Washington was a young fella at the time. He's 21 years old. And Dinwiddie sent the new major and successful land speculator to meet the French authorities with a message basically telling them to back off. He traveled all the way through the frontier to deliver this letter that was like, hey, the British own Ohio. Yeah. And the French were like, nuh-uh, it's ours. So the French were not mean to Washington. They kind of laughed at this kid and they were like, no, nuh-uh, it's not yours. Go away.
That's a very nice letter. Thank you. Run along home now.
Yeah. And so he did go home. It was a 3-month journey. And he gets...
Where is home at this point? Is home
Virginia.
Still in the colonies?
Yes,
Virginia.
It's Virginia. Okay. And so he tells Dinwiddie that the French had no intention of departing the Ohio country and were in fact adding troops to the region. And Dinwiddie didn't like that. So what's he do? He sends the military. That's right. Totally reasonable thing to do in this moment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
so,
you should always meet non-aggression with aggression. It works every time and it never backfires on anyone.
Right. So Washington was picked at 21 years old to lead the military.
Listen,
okay?
not to consistently draw upon our other podcast, but as a reminder, the human brain is not fully developed until around 23 or 24 years old.
Yeah.
So 21-year-old George Washington, genius though he may have been at many things.
He was not a very well-educated man. He did a lot of self-education. Like, it's actually really fascinating. I'm not going to go into that because then we'll be here another hour. But he had a really rough upbringing and stuff. So
did they throw him into this knowing that he was? Did Dinwiddie pick this punk kid knowing that the kid was going to F it up?
No, because he actually had a level of esteem. He was a very successful land speculator, and he was one of the only colonists who had successfly gone into the frontier. So this was like
George Washington, not Dinwiddie.
Yes.
George Washington was a land speculator and went into the frontier.
Yes. And so he did have the trust. He did have this esteem and reputation, but not militarily.
Okay.
However, the plan was not to attack them. Washington's orders from Dinwiddie on this trip were to act on the defensive, but in case any attempts are made to obstruct the works or interrupt the settlements by any persons whatsoever, you are to restrain all such offenders, and in case of resistance, to make prisoners of or kill and destroy them. But not aggressive. Yeah, it was just like...
That's quite an escalation. Hey, if anyone annoys you, you can shoot them.
Yeah. It scans, though, right? Not surprising.
No, it's not. It's quite a leap. Hey, be peaceful, be kind, use your nice words, and if they talk back, kill them.
Yeah, exactly. So made up of this party, because Washington was sent out ahead of like the British regulars, which is your redcoats, right? Because at the time, the militaries were made up of colonists and militias and then also British regulars. So Washington
ends up being a problem for the regulars in a little bit, but we're not there yet.
We're not there yet. So Washington was sent out ahead of the troops with 150 men, and added into this party, we have the Half King Tanagrisson and some of his warriors. So the Half King, yes. So a Half King was the name given to Native American diplomats. And
you are, just to confirm, you are saying half king.
Right. Half King. And so this was a honorary title for Native American diplomats, and he was empowered by the Haudenosaunee.
Okay.
And so he had joined Washington and his men on this mission. They are camped a few miles away from Washington's camp. He's got about 15 warriors with him. Okay.
So George Washington has an entire troop and orders to kill if annoyed. Tanagrisson is a diplomat from the Haudenosaunee who has about 15.
Yes. So they were sent ahead for a reason, and that was because they had already sent Captain William Trent to establish a fort at the forks of the Ohio, which is where the Monongahela and Allegheny rivers converge.
Modern day reference? What's there? Is that? We're talking about Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay. This is where they're headed. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but Pittsburgh didn't exist. So this is it Fort Trent? Is that what they name it?
No, not yet. We're not there. Okay. It would have been Fort Trent. However, when Washington arrived in April 1754, he learned that the French had already overrun the British troops who were already there, and they had started building Fort Duquesne. Yikes.
So the British sent a guy to build a fort. He built a fort. The French said no, tore it down, and started building their own fort in what is currently Pittsburgh.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, Washington and his troops head over the Allegheny Mountains, and they spent an entire month creating a defensive position and building a road from Wills Creek to their position in Great Meadows. Basically, they're waiting for reinforcements. They're building a road so that they can, move their artillery, and they're creating a defensive position. Okay. So here's the thing. The French knew where he was and what he was up to because they weren't very sneaky, but they had strict orders to not attack without provocation. So Captain Contrecoeur, who is the leader of the French troops here, eventually decided to send an emissary to learn what Washington's intentions were. In May, on sign Joseph Coulon de Villiers de Jumonville, it's a mouthful, he was sent with a team of 35 men to gather intelligence and deliver a message that basically said, back off, the French own Ohio. Washington hears the news that the French soldiers were scouting his position less than 15 miles from his camp from a member of Tanagrisson's camp. So he sent 75 men to intercept the French, only to learn later that day from Tanagrisson's camp again that Washington sent his troops in the wrong direction.
The illustrious general and father of our nation went, oh no, a bad guy is coming. Go get him, and runs the wrong way.
Literally, yes. So when he learns this, Washington panicked and headed to Tanagrisson's camp with half of the remaining troops that weren't sent the wrong way, 47 men. Okay, and it was dark. Okay, it's late at night.
Military math is fascinating, but this is silly.
It's so silly, yeah. And so once they got there, Tanagrisson and Washington had a meeting, and they decided they should surprise attack the French instead of getting surprise attacked themselves immediately.
So he's got 47 men, 75 of them still march in the wrong direction, or
and
has
40,
he gone to retrieve those yet?
They haven't met back up yet. So 75 of them are just, they're somewhere they're not supposed to be. 47 of them are holding down the camp, and 47 are with Washington, and now Tennyson and his 15 warriors. Yeah. And they set off together, Washington and his men, Tennyson, some of his warriors, and they stopped a few miles before the French camp very early in the morning so they could scout their position in the land. Then things get messy, both in what happened and the stories we have about what happened.
Okay.
So long story short, there's a short battle where 13 French soldiers, I can't say those words, French soldiers. Say it 5 times fast.
Soldiers. No, I can't say it either. Yeah. French soldiers.
Yeah.
I have to say it really slowly.
So 13 soldiers of the French variety and 1 British soldier were killed. Okay. Long story long. No one knows what actually happened because none of the stories seem to match up. Also, real quick for our listeners, if you decide to look into the full details of this battle, they're quite gruesome. So I will not be telling the full details in the way of
I think the
brutality.
General goal of Founded is PG content.
Yes.
So
Are you
we
ready?
won't be including that. However, we will have all of the resources listed in the bibliophile. So if you want to go a digging for the gory bits, they are available.
They do
and we're
exist.
not judging you because I haven't read them. I don't do anything.
Yeah, I read them all. So now,
no one's judging you, but they'll be linked all in the
bibliography.
Bibliography.
Yeah. Yes.
Lost that word there for a second.
Okay. So
words are hard. Okay, so long story long, we have no idea what is happening.
Well, we have some idea, and we're gonna weed through this together. So I'm gonna tell you the different accounts that exist of this. Okay. So Washington's story, it's basically like this. Me and my buddies, we got pretty close to the French camp surrounding it, and Tennyson and his buddies, they blocked the only escape route. I am so good at strategy. And then the French noticed us and immediately grabbed their guns, and obviously we had to defend ourselves, so I told my guys to fire back. We did a battle for like 15 minutes. We took out 10 other men, including Jumonville, wounded another, and took 21 prisoners. They were all probably spies or something. So not a super detailed account, but it was
just for the record. I am 100% sure that's not verbatim what George Washington
that wasn't verbatim
about Jumonville.
Again,
Glen.
there will be sources to what he actually said, but that's my telling of what he said.
No, I appreciate it. Keep doing it. Okay, so who else said what happened?
So then we have the French account, but that came in 2 different parts.
Well, the main guy, they offed, so the commander of the camp wasn't going to be able to give a report, I don't think.
Well, yeah. So the first story comes from a French soldier who hid in the woods and watched the fight, and part of what happened after.
That would be mine. I would be the French guy hiding in the woods.
Not a verbatim
imagine
telling.
You being the guy, like nudging your bunkmate, be like, "Hey, I gotta potty. I'm gonna hit the tree line." You go out there and you're doing your business, and all of a sudden guns start going off, and like the British are here.
Yeah.
Nope, I'm not going back to the camp. I'm just the pea tree is where I live now.
The pea tree. Okay. So here's your next story. And again, this is not verbatim.
Is this Petrie Man?
This is Petrie Man, as he has now been named by you. Thank you. So he says, we built these cabins so we could shelter ourselves from the overnight rain, right? And when we woke up about 7 o'clock, what do we see? That's right. We're surrounded. English on one side, Native Americans on the other, and the British immediately started firing at us. Though the Native Americans, they were pretty chill. Like they weren't really doing much, but Jumonville told them all to stop because he had something to tell them. And thankfully, Washington was a good listener, so he told his troops to stop firing, and then Jumonville ordered for his message to be read, so the rest of our guys gathered around him, which is when I got away. So when his story ends, Jumonville is still alive. So the end of the French story comes from another witness, a deserter of Tannagrison's camp. Who went to the French. So this is like days after, and he gives them the end of the story. And he says, Jumonville is reading this message, right? He's trying to make peace, but The English didn't care. They shot and killed Jumonville in cold blood while he was reading the message. Honestly, the British would have killed all of the French had it not been for us running interference. We really saved the French. So this is a totally, once you put those two together, totally different stories. Okay? Don't worry. We have more stories.
Feeling a lot of modern parallels. Oh, no two sources can tell us the same news article.
So here's one of the most believable stories from someone who wasn't there. This is a 20-year-old illiterate Irishman who is part of Washington's regiment, and he wasn't there that day. But he heard detailed accounts of what happened from the soldiers that were there. So he was either part of the 75 that were sent the wrong direction or part of the 47 who stayed at the camp. So he heard the detailed accounts of what happened from all the soldiers who were there, and he did see the aftermath. Okay. He says, so I wasn't there, but the people who were told me everything. So basically what had happened was that Washington heard that the French were scouting his position, keeping an eye on him. So Washington and 40 of his men, and then another captain and 40 of his men, and also the king and like 13 of his warriors, they set out to find the guys who found them, right? But they took different routes. So Washington and the half king, they found the French first, and it was super early in the morning. Did I mention that? So the French were just eating breakfast when they heard a noise. So they quick picked up their guns, and one of the French dudes fired their gun. So Washington told all his guys to open fire, and several Frenchmen were killed. And then a bunch tried to run away, but they just ran into Tanacharson and his men. So they ran back to the British, surrendered their weapons, and asked for quarter, which was granted to them. But then, after a pause in the battle, Tanacharson and his men attacked. And the half king asked Jumonville if he was English or French. And when he said French, well, Tanacharson took his tomahawk and split the head of Jumonville, killing him. And then he did something with his brain. But like, no, I didn't see it. I wasn't there, but I heard about it and I did see the aftermath. So
according to the probably most reliable source, Jumonville didn't just die. Jumonville got axed in the head by the half king of the Haudenosaunee, Tanacharson.
But if you remember from our last story, that came from a deserter at Tanacharson's camp. The British shot Jumonville in the head. It's wild, isn't it?
Cool. Why would Tanacharson have any reason, especially since, once again, as a reminder, the natives had a slightly higher compulsion to lean toward French occupation and French occupying their territory in some ways, because it was a better deal all the way around. So why would Tanacharson supposedly off the French guy while working with the British one?
We'll get there.
Okay.
So our next telling of this story, the last one. This story was given to the French 3 weeks after the battle from an English deserter.
So we have a French deserter, we have a Haudenosaunee deserter, and we have... All right. Yeah. So what we've learned is no one was good at keeping their troops around. They tended to wander off.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. What did the British deserter say?
He says, Jumonville had gone to deliver his message after rounds of musket fire, and Washington intended to hear the message. And he'd gone back to the troops he had previously ordered to fire. So Jumonville had been wounded by the gunfire and had fallen, but he was still alive. So he was shot by the British, but he was alive.
Okay.
And so, as Washington is intending to hear the message, he has ordered his troops to stop firing, right? Tanacharson and his men ambushed, and he said to Jumonville, "Thou art not dead yet, my father," and struck him in the head with his hatchet, killing him. And between 10 and 12 other Frenchmen had fallen. The French prisoners had been taken to Virginia. But if the French don't come on English territory again, then the English will no longer enter theirs. Okay. Now, there is a reason this is significant, because if you remember, the Irishman said that Tanacharson asked if he was English or French. That doesn't really make sense. Wouldn't he know?
Yeah.
So the last words that Jumonville heard were, "Thou art not dead yet, my father," and that is super significant.
How is that significant? Because all of those words are, in fact, in English, which is fascinating between a native and a Frenchman. But they don't make sense together. How are those significant? What does that mean?
Okay. So, "Thou art not dead yet." Okay, you're still alive. That's
sure. That one I got.
Okay.
The father part is the confusing part.
He says, "My father." Why would he call him that? Cultural significance in history. Okay. So there is this word that was used by North American Native Americans in the Great Lakes region to refer to the governors of like New France, Canada. And that word was Onenshaw, which meant Great Mountain. But these folks were like the head of the Franco-Indian alliances, and they would give gifts, make alliances, and they were responsible for mediating conflicts amongst other things. But this person was often referred to by the native peoples as father. So Tanagrissan, by saying, "Thou art not dead yet, my father," he killed the father.
He was totally acknowledging that Jumonville was a powerful person who was actually often acting in the interests of the native tribes. He still looked at him and went, "I know who you are, my guy. You are Onenshaw, and off with your head."
Yeah, it was essentially a very, he was denouncing French authority. And I think on another episode, we'll go more into Tanagrissan himself, because you're going to get many biopics. But here's the thing. The Half King, Tanagrissan, he did have reasons to kill Jumonville. And then perhaps send a member of his party to go and tell the French that the English killed him and that the Native Americans.
No, I think I love Tanagrissan. I think I just see what he's doing. He is 100% playing both sides.
Yeah. And so,
he wants them
maybe
to fight with each other.
Spoiler, sweetie. So he has,
like when you put the puzzle together.
Yeah. And because if you remember, the end of the first story the French received was from a quote unquote deserter from Tanagrissan's camp who was like, "No, we saved the French." When all the other stories say that him and his crew came and ambushed after.
Chess Tanagrissan playing over there.
Yeah. So, okay. Why would he want to do this? Great question. So glad you asked. I'll tell you now. So you see, he was pushed out of his land by the French, and wanting to regain control of the Ohio country for his peoples, he knew that he could only do that with British support. And having worked with the British, he knew the only way to get them to take any action was to severely provoke the French into retaliating militarily. And the thing is, he was right. The French would retaliate. And Washington knew this too. So he immediately started.
I have a picture of a 21-year-old George Washington, like standing in one of these log cabins that the French had built that they now occupy. And Tanagrissan started running his mouth and doing some stuff. So he's just banging his head going, this is how I die. This is how I die. This is how I die.
They didn't even they went back to their
own camp.
They went back to their own camp. They start fortifying. Okay.
Well, obviously.
Yeah. And so Washington ended up promoted and he took command of 293 officers and men because the reinforcements that were coming, did
they go the wrong direction too?
No, the commander died. So on the trip, so Washington becomes the commander of 293 officers and men. So he put them to work. Okay, building a log palisade with a low trench and an earth berm around the perimeter of what he named Fort Necessity. But in my opinion, Fort Necessity was in need of much more things. So I will tell you all about Fort Necessity on our next episode. But I do need you to know that the Half King, who was still with the English at this time, told Washington that it was a death trap. And Washington Washington was like, nah, this fort could withstand the attack of 500 men, even though he had never built a fort or come under attack by any number of men before. Like, Washington had all of the audacity. And so
our next episode is going to pick up at Fort Necessity.
And I do feel the need to let you know, okay, that, you know that musical Hamilton?
Yeah, I've heard it once, maybe twice.
Yeah. So you know the song "History Has Its Eyes on You"?
Yeah.
The story I just told you is what it's about. So the original lyrics for "History Has Its Eyes on You" before it was switched to be more vague. I was younger than you are now. The year was 1754. I was given my first command. I triggered the French and Indian War. I made every mistake and felt the shame rise in me. And even now I lie awake, knowing history has its eyes on me. So it is literally about Jumonville's Glen and into Fort Necessity, which I am even more excited to tell you about because the drama and the chaos that ensues and the liquor that is drunk.
No, that feels like the English way. Something is going wrong. Cool, we should drink.
You're not even ready for the whole thing. It is. Oh, man.
All right. To wrap up this episode, we do have the bibliophage bibliography. All right. If you are wanting to read more, I know Tori has done a ton of research across a billion sources, and we will list the bibliography. We'll list the link to the full bibliography in our show notes every time. But right now, if you want to pick up and learn more about the Ohio Company, Tanagrishan, the Haudenosaunee, or Washington really effing up his first ever assignment, check out the two books, The Crucible of War, The 7 Years' War, and the Fate of Empire in British North America, 1754 to 766 by Fred Anderson. That title is dry, but it's there.
So is the book, but it's really interesting.
And then also Washington by Ron Chernow. If you have not heard of Ron Chernow wrote the book Hamilton, which inspired Lin-Manuel Miranda to write Hamilton. That was a huge chunk, not the only chunk, but the huge chunk of the book that Lin-Manuel Miranda referenced while writing the entirety of the hit musical Hamilton. So this is the same dude who inspired the play that we all know and love. Also wrote a book called Washington.
We've come full circle.
So check out Ron Chernow. Basically, if you see Ron Chernow, his books are probably worth reading. They're all really, really good. But in this specific case, if you want more about what we talked about leading up to Fort Necessity, Washington by Ron Chernow.
Yes. And thank you all for listening. We are so glad that you are here. And make sure that when you're done here, you're going to go over and check out Gwenna's new show that I also am on.
Yes.
It's like we just talk to each other all the time.
We just talk to each other. We've just decided to record. It's like really intense FaceTimes where we info dump at each other.
Exactly. And sometimes Gwenna FaceTimes you to tell you to be a little bit more broad in your info dumping at 10 o'clock at night. It happens.
Facts.
So go check out a Bibliophage and also Childproof. That's like the show we've been doing for a while now. That one's good too. And really
check out all of the network from Pleasant Phantom Productions.
Bye.